Episode 34 begins at 2:30 in the afternoon at Sakura's school. It was just before the school day was over. That's when Chelsea was asking Sakura and Nikki, "Did you hear the news about the quiz tournament that's coming up the next day?" And Nikki said that not only that she did, but she read it in the newspaper. Then Nikki says, "Wait, there's a catch, because word has it that the tournament rules simply states that you're supposed to be pairing up." Unfortunately, Nikki says when she told Chelsea the bad news that she'll be pairing up with her cousin, Zachary. So even though Chelsea agrees with Nikki that Zachary may be annoying according to her in her case, but also according to her that Zachary's very good at quizzes. Just to be curious, Chelsea wants to know from Sakura who she's going to be pairing up with. She wasn't sure. So later during cheerleading practice, Sakura does what she knows best, twirling batons, just like what any cheerleader would do, by tossing them up in the air and then, of course, and so on and so forth. Then Sakura had a thought that since she doesn't have any house chores the next day, she thought about pairing up with her best friend, Madison, until a baton conked her on the head. So now that school had ended, so later on that afternoon, Sakura, Madison, Chelsea, Nikki, and Rita all went downtown. And that's when they were thinking about who they should be pairing up the very next morning. Then Sakura was looking at the advertisement that Nikki spoke about the quiz tournament that's coming up the next day. Of course, even better, Rita says that everyone above all ages are allowed to attend. Then Madison, who's Sakura's best friend who agrees with Rita, said that there's something else that's even more better. The prize should be given to the winner. And of course, Sakura seems very excited about it. So then Chelsea told Rita that she's pairing up with her cousin since that's what she's planning to do anyway. Though Rita, being supportive to Chelsea as much as she can be, says, "Don't worry, I'll root for you." Even Nikki agrees to root for Chelsea, and Chelsea thanked them for it. But just when Sakura was about to sign herself and her best friend Madison up, that's when Julian shows up. So Julian told Sakura that he has a suggestion if himself and Sakura should sign up instead. So later that night at the Avalon residence, in the dining room you see Sakura setting up the table for herself, her brother, and her father. Let's not forget Tori's father. In the kitchen, Tori's and Sakura's father, Aiden, was busy cooking when he had heard the news about the quiz tournament that is in town and is coming up the next day. I guess Aiden wasn't kidding when he told Sakura that it's going to be a lot of fun. And Sakura says that even better, she's signing up with her brother's best friend, Julian. So then Aiden was asking Tori, who's Sakura's brother, if he would like to go along. Of course, he's sewing Sakura's sweater at the moment, but although Tori declined and says that he had to work the next day. Then Sakura says that even more better, she's bringing home a prize. And of course, Aiden was glad to hear that. Although Aiden, being supportive as he is, just told Sakura there may be competitions on the way, but I'm sure you'll pull it off. Just do your best. I guess you could say that Sakura was very glad that both her and Tori's father, Aiden, gave her the encouragement and the support that she needs. Oh, good news back with Tori. He had just finished sewing Sakura's sweater and gave it to her. Although she thanked him for it, but then he makes his case to say, "You owe me so big for this." That was right after Sakura says in her case that she's planning on wearing it the next day. Later in Sakura's upstairs bedroom, that's Kiro. He's sitting in the window looking at the moonlight up in the sky. The next thing he did while he was looking at the moonlight up in the sky was he telepathically, if you will, took the book out of Sakura's top drawer, and he couldn't help but think to himself, Yue is coming. But when? So the next morning, while the quiz tournament is coming up, As you may have guessed it, Chelsea's teaming up with her cousin Zachary. Sakura's teaming up with Sakura's brother's best friend Julian, who is also there. And let's not forget Lee and Mei Lin, they're teaming up together too. And let's not forget Sakura's best friend Madison. She'll be recording it, as usual. Anyway, Mei Lin just pleaded a case to Sakura to say, I'm taking home all the prizes, so if I were you, I might as well give it up. Oh, and speaking of Julian, I guess you could say he just made it just in time. And the first thing he did was to say hello to everyone that was there, including Sakura. So after Sakura said good morning to Julian, the first thing he did was to apologize for being late. The reason for that, as Julian explains in his case, is because he's gotten so tired lately that he had hardly have heard the alarm clock go off. So, now that Julian and Sakura are all set, so what Julian wants to know from Sakura, are we ready to get started? Of course, Sakura said. Of course, the only person that's not amused with this is Lee. So after Julian had made a suggestion to sign both himself and Sakura up, that's when he heads off. Well, now that everybody's all signed up, all they have to do is wait for the tournament to begin. Wishing them luck with Nikki, Rita, and of course Madison. So moments later, the announcer shows up and he thanks everyone for attending, first of all. Second of all, he said that before they can get started, there are some rules that needs to be followed. He also said that each of the partners has one of those stamp cards around their necks. And what it's for is that he said that every time a quiz gets corrected, that means the person will stamp on the cards that the contestants have around their necks. And then they go to the next quiz, and so on, and so on, and so on. And then finally, what's even better is that there's an item that's somewhere that's hidden at any point of the location. And oh, here's something even better. Each contestant has a map so that to make sure they don't get lost. So of course what's even better, there are 10 quizzes for each of the contestants to pass. Then the announcer said that there's only one more thing left to find. Once the cards have been completed from each of the contestants, there's a plaque with a town's flower on it that must be found. And once it was found, each of the contestants will return to the grounds right away. But the catch is, the plaque must be found last, not first. So anyway, back with Zachary and Chelsea, that's when Zachary says, don't worry, I'm an ace in this. We can win a prize for sure. And Chelsea says, really? Of course. And then Zachary starts explaining how the first quiz was invented and etc. So after Chelsea has decided to drag her cousin away, after she was getting annoyed with all the Zach's made up stories, but that's not exactly made up at all. Of course, Julian was more than happy to answer the question himself. And of course, Sakura was impressed by it. So back with the announcer, he says that all the contestants has to do is answer the first question first. And so the picture of the star is revealed, and it's made out of 10 matches. And of course, what's even better is that all the contestants has to do was to answer that question by using all 10 of the matches at the same time. And he said once the first question is correct, you receive a map to go to the next location. So we know what this means. That means that the quiz tournament is now just started. And of course, Sakura had no idea what the answer to that first question was. But Julian tells her not to worry about it and that he knows. So they go to the booth, and by surprise, Tori, who's Sakura's brother and of course Julian's best friend, is there. And of course, Tori wasn't kidding when he said that he's working, and one of the booths is where he is working at. So anyway, back with Julian, he gave the answer right away. And of course, in seconds flat, no doubt. So Julian was asking his best friend who was working at the booth, is this it? Well, it happens to be the correct answer, and of course, Tori seems impressed with it. So he decides to give Sakura the stamp for the first answer that was correct. So Julian and Sakura were off to a good start so far, so that's one question answered down and nine to go. So as they're heading off to the next location, that's when they saw Lee and Maylin had passed them by to get to their first question. So back with Lee and Maylin, they're entering the exact same booth as Sakura and Julian went to, but then left. That's when Maylin figured she knew the answer, while Lee and Tori, though they didn't say a word, are face to face with each other again. Next thing you know, Tori told Maylin that the answer was wrong. And so she tries again and again and again, but again, Tori said no. So back with Julie and Sakura, they went to every question booth there is and got them all correct. They got nine of them done so far without a problem. So the only thing left to do is to answer the last question inside a schoolyard. So by the time they arrived there, that's when they met up with Miss Mackenzie right after Chelsea and Zachary had finished all nine of their questions as well. So now that they finished their 10th, that's when they met up with Julian Sakura. So after Zachary pleaded his case with Chelsea that he's going to help her win the prize for sure. So after Sakura said hello to Miss Mackenzie, and then she asked her, "What are you doing here?" She says, "Well, since there are many students in my class, so I thought I should help out." It's a good thing she did. And of course, Miss Mackenzie was more than happy to say hello to Julian, who's Sakura's brother's best friend. So after that, Julian and Miss Mackenzie were smiling at each other. So back with Sakura and Chelsea, Chelsea was asked by Sakura how many stamps does she have. As a matter of fact, Sakura was told by Chelsea that she already had 10 of them and Sakura's just now catching up. So Sakura told Miss Mackenzie the good news that she and Julian has 9 stamps so far, so all they need is one more. So, after wishing Julian and Sakura luck, that's when Chelsea and Zachary head off after she did the same to wish Sakura luck and Julian in as well. So after Chelsea and Zachary head off, so that leaves Sakura and Julian to solve the last question. So what Miss Mackenzie did was to put out a beaker with a marble inside. So all Sakura has to do is just answer the question and she'll get the 10th stamp. So Miss Mackenzie told Sakura the rules that all she has to do is just get the marble out of the beaker without touching it or putting her finger in it or anything else but that. So Miss Mackenzie has told Julie and Sakura that all they had to do is play rock, paper, scissors, but after losing twice, that's when Sakura won. Because after all, scissors cut paper. So after Miss Mackenzie saw that Sakura had won the paper, rock, scissors, so it's now up to her to answer the question. So that's what she did. Although Julian, supportive as he is, has told Sakura, all you have to do is just take your time and think it over. That's all. I'm sure you'll come up with the right answer, Julian said. I'm sure I will. And I can, Sakura said. So Sakura did what Julian suggested and just stared at the marble in the beaker. And then she thought, and she thought, and she thought. In the meantime, Julian has a conversation with Miss Mackenzie. So speaking of Miss Mackenzie, just when she was about to accidentally let slip to Julian's secret to find out who he really was, that's when Sakura says that she's got the answer to the question. And by how, you may ask? By filling up the beaker full of water. That's how. And that's how she got the marble out. And voila, she had answered the last question correctly. So that earns her and Julian her last stamp. What's even better is that Julian got the map from Miss Mackenzie. So after thanking Miss Mackenzie, that's when both Julian and Sakura head off. But before Sakura could leave, she gives her some advice, Miss Mackenzie that is. She says, "You better be careful out there because there's going to be a full moon out there." And that was something that Sakura will never forget. So after thanking Miss Mackenzie for the advice, that's when Sakura heads off. So back with Sakura and Julian, after they finish their last question, that's when Sakura decides to have a chat with her best friend, Madison. And now Madison's getting worried because she's wondering what's going on with Sakura. so she went to approach her. So when Madison was asking Sakura what was wrong with her, at first she was going to tell Madison Sakura that is what Miss Mackenzie had said earlier, but she decides to brush it off. She said, "Forget it, it's nothing." Anyway, after Sakura got a smile from her best friend Madison, that's when Madison starts to record a comment from Julian. He said that the carbon, according to what his map said, is somewhere in Penguin Park, and that's where he and Sakura will be heading off at. So after waving at Madison, both Sakura and Julian, and that's when they both head off. So back with Julian and Sakura, they had just arrived at Penguin Park. Once Sakura and Julian had arrived at Penguin Park, that's when Julian said to Sakura that somewhere around in the forest there's a plaque that needs to be found. And so she says, "Okay." And so they went off. Now back with Sakura and Julian, they're now in the forest. And of course, Julian says that there's a carving around somewhere. And although Sakura agrees, she says, "Great, the faster we find it, the sooner we get out of this place." So anyway, Sakura and Julian were supposed to find a carving somewhere. He wasn't sure what to do, so he decided to check the map again, the one that Miss Mackenzie had gave him earlier. As for Sakura, she wandered off to the edge of a cliff. Then she's staring at the full moon up in the sky, and she remembered what Miss Mackenzie said to her earlier before she left the school grounds. She says, "Be careful, there's a full moon outside." And Miss Mackenzie wasn't kidding when she said that. Then we go to Sakura's dream again. It's herself in a pink battle suit, surrounded by cherry blossom petals, staring at the radio tower. Well, that and the mysterious figure in black with gold eyes. But wait, that's not all. There's Carol that's flying right beside her. And of course, the cherry blossom petal turned into cards. And she was still staring at the radio tower with that and the figure in black with gold eyes. Then back to the present! With Sakura in the forest that's not far away from Penguin Park, and of course she closed her eyes. Julian, back with him, he found out what was going on and he tried to save Sakura from falling off the cliff, and when she did, he grabs her the best way he knew how to save her life, and what happens next, I can't say for sure. Meanwhile, Kiro's still looking at the full moon outside from the window inside of Sakura's upstairs bedroom of the Avalon residence. So back with Miss Mackenzie, it is now late at night, and she too was staring at the full moon in the sky, just like what Kiro did at the Avalon residence, and what Sakura also did. So anyway, speaking of Sakura, meanwhile back at Penguin Park, well, good news thanks to Julian. Sakura's safe and sound on the ground and intact, and have his jacket over her and her backpack that's right beside her head. When she woke up, she realized what just happened, and then she couldn't help but wonder, what was I doing on the ground? What happened? What was going on? Then she looked over her shoulder to look for Julian. Luckily, he's not that far away. So the first thing that Julian did after he found out that she's okay, which is a relief, he was asking if she was hurt anywhere. And Sakura said no. "Well, that's good news," Julian said. But then when Julian tries to stand up, but then he sat back down again. Sakura was very worried that something terrible must have happened to him. So when Sakura says, "Oh my goodness, you must have hurt your leg," so she went over to Julian. So Sakura, after she found out, she says, "Oh dear, Julian, this is all my fault. I should have been more careful, and now look what I did." Sakura felt a little guilt-ridden and ashamed for what has happened, and so she apologized. So Julian passed her on her head and said not to worry about it. Not only is Sakura assuring of Julian that she can walk, but even better, Julian told her that he had some good news for her. He found that carving right behind the two trees just before he rescued her when she fell off the cliff. So Julian was more than glad to show Sakura the carving he had found earlier back in the woods. And when Sakura saw it, she was in awe. and she was very surprised to see that Julian had found it when he did. Then Sakura looks up into the sky again to look at the full moon, and then she looked back at Julian, and she says, I wonder if the others had finished yet. Well, what do you say we find out? Julian suggested. Then Julian was asking Sakura to do a favor for him if she could help him walk, so they can both head there together, and so she agreed. So meanwhile in downtown Reddington where the quiz tournament was, Sakura's brother Tori was wondering what's going on with his sister and why she hasn't showed up yet. Of course, on top of that, he's even worried about his best friend Julian, and he too hadn't showed up yet. Also concerned about Sakura were Chelsea, Nikki, Rita, Zachary, and of course, Madison, who's her best friend. And let's not forget Lee and Maylin, who unfortunately are still stuck in the first tent. So, she didn't win the prize that night. So, speaking of Sakura's best friend Madison, who was worried and concerned, when one of Madison's bodyguards came back, she told her the bad news. She said that she couldn't find Sakura anywhere. So back with Chelsea, Nikki, Rita, and Zachary, who I forgot to mention, that's when Chelsea was asked by Nikki if she was sure if Sakura and Julian were with them. Chelsea not only said that she's sure, but unbeknownst to her, since Julian and Sakura had finished the last quiz already, but she says that Sakura and Julian should have been back by now. So back with Lee, who's with Tori, who's Sakura's brother, Lee wants to know from him, has Sakura and Julian had come back yet? Instead of answering Lee's question, he said that he was going to go look for his sister and his best friend, and Lee suggested to go with him. But by surprise, here comes Sakura and Julian. Well, good news, they're safe. The first two to run up to Sakura and Julian were her brother Tori and Lee. Also, Sakura's best friend Madison. And let's not forget Chelsea, Nikki, Rita, and Zachary. They were happy to see her too. And of course, Julian as well. So now that everybody's relieved to see Julian and Sakura are okay, what her brother wants to know is, what's going on? Where have you been? Well, Julian hurt her leg, Sakura says, and it's all my fault. Well, Julian tries to brush it off, but Tori says, never mind that. And that's when Julian collapsed into Tori. How about you, Tori asks, are you okay? I'm fine, Sakura says, but I think we should get Julian some help right away, she suggested. I think you're right, Tori says when he agrees with her. Then here comes Sakura's best friend Madison along with Chelsea, Nikki, Rita, and Zachary. They were so glad to see that she's okay. Then Nikki asks Sakura a question. What happened? I'm okay, Sakura says, but I'm sorry I kept you all waiting so long. Back with Tori, he says, oh, Sakura, you forgot. Here's your prize. And so he gave it to her. It's a pin. And of course, Sakura thanked her brother for it. Oh, and even better, Julian's got a pin too. So he's got the same one as Sakura did. But after he tells her brother that he was going to get Sakura one, but he didn't need to. So in Sakura's case, it was the best prize she ever had. And as for her brother, he agrees to take his best friend home. I guess Sakura has a lot of learning to do in her case, since she still has 31 cards on her list, and Lee has only 5 on his list. But who is Yue? We're about to find out, but for right now, that's the end of episode 34.